The situation on the Zerian colony of Xander appeared utterly hopeless as endless swarms of ravenous Kagul Warriors butchered every defender in sight. The helpless civilians were on the brink of being devoured, and defeat seemed inevitable. Then the humans arrived. Captain Rylan observed the massive invasion fleet of Kagul plaguing the skies above Xander. Organic ships blanketed the horizon, blotting out the sun with their bloated bodies. On the surface, the Kagul slaughtered soldier after soldier with vicious ecstasy. The fall of the colony was imminent. Rylan engaged the invasion in a desperate attempt to buy time, but the Kagul ships tore through the Valiant's shields mercilessly. A monstrous Kagul mothership loomed into view, its world-ending weaponry charging up to eradicate the Valiant and the colony below. At that critical moment, Rylan spotted distant shapes approaching at impossible speed. Zooming in, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was the humans. Mankind's fleet hurtled toward Xander with reckless abandon to join the fight. But would they arrive in time? And even if they did, what hope did they stand against such overwhelming odds? The humans were the colony's last chance. If they failed, everyone on Xander would perish. The situation still seemed hopeless, but at least the humans were crazy enough to try. As the massive Kagul mothership's main weapon neared full charge, pulsing with a menacing green glow, Rylan felt his stomach drop. There was no more time. This was it, the end. He braced himself for the inevitable searing flash of energy that would vaporize the Valiant and the colony below. But instead of oblivion, a series of sudden bright flashes lit up space near the Valiant. Rylan blinked rapidly, trying to clear the spots from his vision. Emerging from the fading light, a fleet of unknown vessels, all sleek lines and gleaming metal, had appeared out of nowhere. Before Rylan could even process this turn of events, the mysterious ships opened fire on the Kagul with devastating precision and power. Rylan watched the tactical display with growing awe as the strange angular vessels effortlessly carved their way through the Kagul invasion force. Their weaponry was like nothing he had ever seen, tearing through the organic hulls as if they were made of paper. The insectoid ships barely had a chance to react before they were blown apart. "Sir, we're being hailed by the unknown fleet," Rylan's comms officer called out. "Put them through," Rylan replied, straightening his uniform and trying to regain his composure. Who were these beings that had appeared in their darkest hour? The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human male in a crisp black and silver uniform. His posture radiated confidence and authority. "This is Admiral Robert Lucas of the United Earth Federation," the man declared, his voice strong and steady. "We've come to help. My fleet will handle the CRRA forces." Rylan blinked in surprise. United Earth Federation? He had never heard of such a faction, and humans, they were a completely unknown species. Where had they come from? Why had they intervened? 1,000 questions raced through his mind. I'm Captain Rylan of the Zerian Defense Fleet," he managed to reply. "Your assistance is most welcome, Admiral Lucas, but I must ask, who are you? Why have you come to our aid?" The human admiral's expression grew serious. "We've been monitoring the Kagul's aggressive expansion for some time now. Their cruelty and hunger for conquest cannot be allowed to spread further. The United Earth Federation has decided to take a stand against their tyranny. We're here to help you push them back." Rylan felt a surge of gratitude towards these enigmatic humans, even as a small part of him remained cautious. The Galactic Alliance had very limited contact with species outside their own star systems. This sudden appearance and offer of aid from a technologically advanced unknown race was unprecedented. But there was no time to dwell on such thoughts. The Valiant shuddered as a Kagul ship raked its flank with plasma fire. Rylan refocused on the battle at hand. The combined human and Zerian forces made quick work of the remaining Kagul vessels. Rylan couldn't help but marvel at the speed and efficiency of the human ships as they darted through the engagement, their weapons cutting down Kagul craft with methodical precision. Admiral Lucas had deployed squadrons of what appeared to be strike craft, small one-man vehicles that danced nimbly around the lumbering Kagul ships. They fired volleys of some kind of guided projectile that tore through the Kagul hulls with ease. But it was the humans' capital ships that truly captured Rylan's attention. They moved with a sleek deadliness, graceful yet undeniably powerful, like predators on the hunt. Their main cannons fired concentrated blasts of plasma that could core a Kagul vessel stem to stern with a single shot. Under this devastating onslaught, the tide of battle quickly turned. The Kagul mothership, now billowing atmosphere from a dozen grievous wounds, began to ponderously turn in an attempt to flee. Rylan felt a fierce surge of satisfaction as he watched the monstrous vessel lurch drunkenly, its world-ending weapon now reduced to a half-melted wreck. In mere minutes, the once unstoppable Kagul horde had been reduced to shattered fragments and fading vapors by the humans' overwhelming technological might and combat prowess. The colony, which had been teetering on the brink of annihilation, was saved. As the last Kagul vessel winked out on the tactical display, Rylan slumped back in his command chair, his heart hammering. They had survived against all odds. The people of Zerian would live to see another day, and it was all thanks to the humans. But even as relief washed over him, Rylan couldn't shake a sense of unease. This victory, decisive as it appeared, felt more like the opening shots of a much larger conflict. The Kagul would undoubtedly return with even greater numbers to avenge this defeat. And the humans, what was their endgame? Rylan studied the sleek Federation ships hanging in space around him. What was the truth of this mysterious species who wielded such advanced weapons and possessed the will to use them? Only time would tell. In the aftermath of the Kagul defeat, Captain Rylan found himself face to face with the enigmatic Admiral Lucas on the bridge of the Valiant. The human cut an imposing figure in his crisp uniform, his piercing gaze seeming to see right through Rylan. "Captain Rylan," Lucas began, his voice calm but authoritative. "I think it's time we had a frank discussion about the situation at hand." Rylan nodded, motioning for Lucas to follow him to the briefing room just off the bridge. As the door slid shut behind them, Rylan turned to face the Admiral. "I cannot express my gratitude enough for your timely intervention, Admiral," Rylan said sincerely. "Without your help, Zerian would have fallen. But I must ask, why? Why have you chosen to involve yourselves in this conflict?" Lucas leaned against the table, his expression growing serious. "The United Earth Federation has been tracking the Kagul movements for some time now. Their invasion of Zerian was just one small part of a much larger plan, a plan to subjugate and conquer the entire galaxy." Rylan felt a chill run down his spine at the Admiral's words. The Kagul were even more dangerous than he had realized. Lucas continued, "We've developed advanced technologies, Captain, powerful weapons, faster than light travel. But we've kept these advancements hidden from the rest of the galaxy. We didn't want to draw unwanted attention or destabilize the balance of power." Rylan frowned, a sense of unease growing in his gut. "But why reveal yourselves now? What do you hope to gain from this war?"
Lucas met Rylan's case unflinchingly.
"The United Earth Federation seeks only to protect the galaxy from the Kagul threat. We have no ulterior motives, no hidden agenda. We simply cannot stand by and watch as the Kagul spread their tyranny and cruelty unchecked." Before Rylan could respond, a sudden explosion rocked the Valiant, sending both men stumbling. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the lighting flickered. "Report!" Rylan barked into his comm unit. "Captain, the Kagul have launched a surprise attack." His second-in-command responded, her voice tense. "They're trying to board the ship." Rylan and Lucas exchanged a grim look before sprinting out of the briefing room and back onto the bridge. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos. The Valiant's crew scrambled to their stations as the ship shuddered under the impact of Kagul weapons fire. On the view screen, a swarm of Kagul boarding craft could be seen latching onto the Valiant's hull like parasites. Rylan felt a surge of anger and defiance. He would not allow these monsters to take his ship. "All hands, prepare to repel boarders," he ordered over the ship-wide comm. "Get me a damage report and redirect all available power to shields and weapons." Beside him, Admiral Lucas was already issuing commands to his own forces. "All Federation personnel, assist the Zephrins in defense of the Valiant. Repel the Kagul at all costs." As the two crews worked frantically to coordinate their defenses, the first Kagul boarders began to breach the Valiant's hull. The sounds of weapons fire and screams soon echoed through the corridors. Rylan grabbed his sidearm and rushed to join the fray, Admiral Lucas close behind. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of Kagul Warriors, their chitus armor glistening in the emergency lighting. The Kagul let out a series of clicking war cries and charged forward, their wicked claws extended. Rylan and Lucas opened fire, their weapons spitting plasma bolts into the oncoming horde. To Rylan's surprise, the Kagul soldiers fought with a skill and ferocity that matched the Zephrins. They moved with a fluid grace, their weapons finding their marks with uncanny precision. Side by side, humans and Zephrins fought to push back the Kagul invasion. The corridors of the Valiant became a gruesome battleground, littered with the broken bodies of both defender and invader alike. Rylan lost track of time as he fought, his world narrowing to the flash of his weapon and the next Kagul in his sight. Beside him, Admiral Lucas was a whirlwind of motion, his plasma rifle cutting down Kagul warriors with ruthless efficiency. After what felt like an eternity, the tide of battle began to turn. The Kagul's advance faltered, then broke entirely as the combined human and Zerian forces pushed them back towards their boarding craft. Finally, the last Kagul invader was dispatched, and an eerie silence fell over the Valiant. Rylan lowered his weapon, his chest heaving with exertion. Around him, the survivors began to take stock of the damage. The cost had been high. Rylan saw far too many of his crew lying motionless on the deck, their lives cut short by Kagul claws and plasma. The humans, too, had suffered heavy casualties in the defense of the ship. As medics and damage control teams rushed to tend to the wounded and assess the damage, Rylan turned to Admiral Lucas. The human's face was grim, splattered with Kagul blood, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "This is only the beginning," Lucas said quietly. "The Kagul will not stop until they have conquered or destroyed everything in their path." Rylan nodded, a heavy weight settling in his chest. He knew that Lucas was right. If they hoped to defeat the Kagul, they would need to stand together, human and Zerian, united against a common foe. But even as he accepted the necessity of this alliance, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of his mind. The humans were powerful, yes, and their aid had been invaluable. But what secrets did they still hide? What other technologies and weapons did they possess? For now, though, such questions would have to wait. The Valiant was safe, and the immediate Kagul threat had been repelled. That was enough for the moment. Rylan clasped Admiral Lucas' shoulder, meeting the human's gaze with a newfound respect. "Let us hope that our combined strength will be enough to see us through the battles to come." The Valiant shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Neuraxis, the Kagul stronghold world. On the bridge, Captain Rylan gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles turning pale. Beside him, Admiral Lucas stood resolute, his gaze fixed on the view screen showing the planet's surface rapidly approaching. "All hands, prepare for atmospheric entry," Rylan announced over the ship-wide comm, "brace for incoming fire." As if on cue, the Valiant's shields flared as Kagul anti-aircraft batteries opened up from the surface. The ship rocked under the impact but held steady. "Return fire," Lucas ordered. "Target those defense installations with precision strikes." The Valiant's weapons answered, lancing out with beams of concentrated energy. On the surface, Kagul gun emplacements vanished in blossoms of flame. Rylan watched the tactical display, his heart pounding. The Kagul's main base was a sprawling fortification bristling with defenses. Intelligence gathered by human scouts indicated that the Kagul Queen herself was located deep within the complex, directing her forces. If they could take her out, it could mean the end of the Kagul threat. "Entering atmosphere now," the helmsman reported. "Preparing for landing." The Valiant shuddered again as it pushed through the dense lower layers of Neuraxis's atmosphere. The ship was joined by a small fleet of human vessels, their sleek hulls glinting in the orange light of the planet. "Star Admiral, our ground forces are ready to deploy," a human officer reported from her station. Lucas nodded. "Excellent. Have them form up with the Zerian troops in the main hangar bay. We'll hit the Kagul base with everything we've got." Rylan stood, unholstering his plasma pistol. "I'll lead the ground assault personally," he said. "My place is with my soldiers." Lucas met his gaze, a glint of respect in his eyes. "As will I," he said simply. The two leaders made their way to the hangar bay, where a contingent of elite Zephyrins and human soldiers awaited them. The humans were encased in advanced combat exoskeletons, bristling with weapons. The Zephians, by contrast, wore more traditional armor, but each carried a deadly plasma blade, a symbol of their warrior culture. Rylan felt a swell of pride as he surveyed the assembled troops. These were the best of the best, handpicked for this critical mission. "Listen up," he called out, his voice carrying across the hangar. "We're going to be hitting the Kagul where they live. It won't be easy, but I know each and every one of you will fight with honor and courage. Remember your training, watch your backs, and we'll all come home victorious." The soldiers let out a chorus of affirmative shouts, slamming fists against chest plates in a show of solidarity. With a hiss of hydraulics, the Valiant's main ramp lowered, revealing the war-torn landscape of Neuraxis. In the distance, the Kagul base loomed, a dark stain against the horizon. "Move out," Lucas ordered, and the strike force surged forward, weapons at the ready. Almost immediately, They came under fire from Kagul defenders. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, forcing the Zerian and humans to dive for cover behind the smoldering remains of Kagul vehicles. Rylan popped up from behind a twisted hunk of metal, squeezing off a few shots from his pistol. Beside him, Lucas was directing his soldiers with calm precision, his own plasma rifle barking orders. "Push forward," Rylan yelled over the din of battle. "We need to breach their outer defenses." The strike force moved up, leapfrogging from cover to cover. The human soldiers' exoskeletons proved invaluable, their enhanced strength and speed allowing them to traverse the broken ground with ease. As they neared the base's outer walls, a new threat emerged. Massive chitus creatures burst from the ground, letting out ear-splitting screeches. These were the Kral bioengineered monstrosities, living weapons bred for war. Rylan felt a moment of fear as he took in the creature's razor-sharp claws and dripping mandibles, but he pushed it aside, raising his plasma blade. "Stand firm," he shouted. "Take these abominations down." The Zerian met the creature's head-on, their plasma blades flashing. The humans, meanwhile, targeted the monsters with concentrated fire from their energy weapons, burning through their thick carapaces. Rylan found himself fighting side by side with Lucas, the two leaders forming an island of resistance amidst the chaos. Lucas moved with a fluid grace, his exoskeleton-enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge and weave through the creature's attacks. Rylan, for his part, hacked and slashed with his plasma blade. The superheated edge sliced through chitin and bone as the last of the creatures fell, twitching to the ground. Rylan met Lucas' gaze, a look of understanding passing between them, a recognition of each other's skill and bravery. But there was no time to rest. The base's outer wall loomed before them, a formidable barrier bristling with automated defenses. "Bring up the heavy weapons," Lucas ordered. "We need to punch a hole through that wall." Human soldiers hefted massive plasma cannons, taking aim at the Kagul fortifications. With a series of deafening blasts, they let loose the superheated bolts, slamming into the wall with devastating force. Thunder roared as the relentless barrage pounded the wall, crumbling it and opening up a breach. Rylan raised his blade, pointing it forward. "Charge!" he bellowed, and the strike force surged through the gap, pouring into the Kagul base like a tidal wave. Inside, the fighting was close and brutal. Kagul warriors swarmed from every direction, their claws and plasma weapons flashing. But the Zephyrins and humans fought with a determination born of desperation, cutting down their foes with ruthless efficiency. Rylan lost himself in the rhythm of battle, his blade a blur of motion. He could feel the fatigue setting in, his muscles burning with exertion, but he pushed himself onward. They had to reach the Queen. Beside him, Lucas was a force of nature, his exoskeleton-enhanced strength allowing him to plow through Kral warriors like a juggernaut, his energy weapons flaring with deadly precision. Step by step, the strike force pushed deeper into the base, leaving a trail of Kagul corpses in their wake. Finally, they reached the heart of the complex, a massive chamber pulsing with sickly green light. And there, towering over them, was the Kagul Queen. She was a grotesque sight, her bloated body supported by multiple chitus limbs, her massive head crowned with a twisted array of sensory organs, each one pulsing with malevolent intelligence. As the strike force entered the chamber, the Queen let out a psychic screech that sent shock waves of pain through Rylan's mind. He staggered, fighting to keep his feet. Around him, Zephyrins and human soldiers alike clutched at their heads, some dropping to their knees in agony. But Lucas, through sheer force of will, pushed forward, his energy weapons blazing. The Queen's hide was tough, resistant even to human weaponry, but Lucas kept firing, his shots burning away at her carapace bit by bit. Seeing his chance, Rylan leapt forward, his plasma blade raised high. With a battle cry on his lips, he brought the blade down, slicing deep into the Queen's flesh. She let out a mind-rending shriek, lashing out with her claws, but Rylan was ready, dodging and weaving as he continued his relentless assault. Meanwhile, Lucas had scaled the Queen's body, clambering up her chitus hide with single-minded determination. As he reached her head, he jammed his rifle into one of her pulsing sensory organs and pulled the trigger. The Queen convulsed, her psychic scream reaching a crescendo, and then, with a shudder, she collapsed, her massive body crashing to the chamber floor. Rylan stood panting, his plasma blade still lodged in the Queen's carcass. He met Lucas' gaze as the human climbed down from the Queen's body, his rifle still smoking. "Is it over?" Rylan asked, hardly daring to hope. But before Lucas could respond, the queen stirred. Her eyes, each the size of a man's head, fluttered open, fixing on the two leaders with a look of pure hatred. "Fools!" she hissed, her voice a rasp of agony. "You think your victory here matters? You have no idea what is coming." Rylan and Lucas exchanged a confused glance. "What are you talking about?" Lucas demanded. The queen let out a rattling laugh, ichor bubbling from her mandibled mouth. "The storm," she whispered, "the great devourer that consumed our world. It is coming for you all." Rylan felt a chill run down his spine. "What storm?" he pressed. "Explain yourself." The queen's eyes began to glaze over, her life force ebbing away. "We fled," she murmured, her voice growing fainter by the second. "Fled the cataclysm that destroyed our homeworld, the hunger that scoured our stars. And now, in our death throes, we have led it right to you." With a final shudder, the queen fell still, the light fading from her eyes. Rylan and Lucas stood in stunned silence, the queen's cryptic words echoing in their minds. Around them, the surviving Zerian and human soldiers began to regroup, tending to the wounded and securing the chamber. But even as they tallied their victory, a sense of unease hung over them. The queen's final revelation had opened up a new array of questions, each more troubling than the last. What was this cataclysm she spoke of? What hunger had consumed the Kral homeworld? And most chilling of all, was it now heading for them? As Rylan met Lucas's gaze, he saw the same grim determination reflected there. They had won the battle, but the war, it seemed, was far from over. The Kral threat had been ended, but a new mystery loomed on the horizon, one that threatened not just Zerian or the Galactic Alliance, but perhaps the entire galaxy itself. The news of the Kagul Queen's defeat spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Galactic Alliance and the United Earth Federation wasted no time in capitalizing on the opportunity, launching a coordinated offensive to push back the weakened Kagul forces and reclaim the worlds they had conquered. Rylan stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching as reports flooded in from various fronts. The Kagul, without their queen's telepathic guidance, were in disarray, their once formidable armies now scattered and vulnerable. Alliance and human ships chased them from system to system, liberating planet after planet. For a moment, it seemed like a turning point in the war, a chance to bring an end to the blood and destruction the Kral had wrought. But as Rylan listened to the chatter on the comms, he heard whispers of something that made his blood run cold. "They were fleeing," one voice said. "The Kagul were running from something that destroyed their homeworld. We should leave them to their fate," another argued. "After what they've done, they deserve no mercy." The revelations from the Kagul Queen had sparked a heated debate among the Alliance leaders. Some, moved by the prospect of an entire species facing extinction, argued for offering aid and mercy to the Kagul. "They're intelligent beings," they said. "No matter their wrongs, do we have the right to condemn them to death?" But others, including Admiral Lucas, were less forgiving. "They've slaughtered billions," he growled during one particularly heated exchange, "enslaved entire worlds. Their crimes are beyond forgiveness." Rylan found himself torn. Part of him burned for justice, for retribution against the Kagul for all the lives they had taken. But another part, the part that had seen too much death, too much suffering, recoiled at the thought of driving a species to extinction. Didn't they set out to stop a catastrophe? When did they become the dealers of it? As the debate raged on, Rylan threw himself into the war effort, hoping to lose himself in the heat of battle. But even as the Alliance forces rooted out the final remnants of the Kral Empire, he couldn't escape the nagging doubts that plagued him. The humans, for all their help, were still an enigma. Their technology, their capabilities, far exceeded anything the Galactic Alliance had ever seen. And while they claimed to be allies, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their agenda than they were letting on. His suspicions only grew when reports started coming in of human ships breaking off from the main fleet, conducting secret missions in Kagul space. When confronted, Admiral Lucas waved off the concerns, citing classified operations and a need-to-know basis. But Rylan knew something was brewing. He could feel the tension in the air, a hesitancy, a reluctance that couldn't be the end of a long war. And so he looked for answers in the stories shared between soldiers. And what he heard shook him to his core. A prophecy of an even greater horror that forced its previous slayers into mass genocide. A rumored warning dismissed in the thrill of victory. But as the freed world scrambled to rebuild and the galaxy found peace once more, Rylan saw doubt creep into the light. He watched as whispers grew, and with them, that hesitancy and reluctance. He noticed how humans shifted their stances and how former allies avoided their eyes. And with each passing week, dread took root in his heart. It was only a matter of time until someone took that feeling and turned it into words, into actions. And peace would become a fond memory. That someone appeared during the victory celebrations on Xander. In front of a gathered crowd, standing before a makeshift memorial for those lost in battle, stood a veteran, a fellow Zephyrin, Kale he called himself. And his words were honey and vinegar. "And we stand here today in the light of victory," he began, his voice carrying over the assembled masses. "A victory bought with the blood of our brothers and sisters. A victory that should have been ours long ago." Rylan watched from the sidelines, a sense of unease growing in his gut as Kale spoke. "The Kagul have been beaten back, their queen slain," Kale continued. "But still they purr, still they cling to life like the vermin they are. And now, some among our leaders wish to show them mercy, to extend a helping hand to the very creatures who sought our extinction." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rylan saw heads nodding, saw the anger and resentment simmering in the eyes of those gathered. "I say no more," Kale's voice rose to a shout. "No more half measures, no more weakness. The Kagul must be dealt with once and for all. Their empire lies in ruins, their armies shattered. Now is the time to strike, to burn out the root of their evil before it can take hold again." The crowd erupted into cheers. Rylan felt a chill run down his spine. This was the spark he had feared, the ember that could ignite the galaxy once more. In the days that followed, Kale's message spread like wildfire across the Galactic Alliance. His followers grew in number, disillusioned by what they saw as the weakness and indecision of their leaders. They called for a final solution, a purge of the Kagul from the galaxy. Rylan found himself caught in the middle of the growing crisis. His conscience warred with his sense of duty. He knew the Kagul's crimes were grave, that their atrocities could not be forgiven. But the thought of genocide, of wiping out an entire species, made his stomach turn. And then there were the humans. Admiral Lucas had been conspicuously silent on the matter of the Kagul's fate. When pressed, he simply stated that the United Earth Federation would support the decision of the Galactic Alliance. But Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. He thought back to the secret missions, the classified operations that the humans had been conducting. What were they up to? What were they hiding? As the political landscape shifted and fractured around him, Rylan knew he had to act. He couldn't let Kale and his followers plunge the galaxy back into war. He couldn't let the Alliance tear itself apart. But he also couldn't ignore the doubts that plagued him, the questions that burned in his mind about the humans and their true intentions.